In this video, we're going to go through on how to do the assembly for the wheel assembly. So the first thing I'm going to do, since this is a metric file, I'm going to go ahead and select metric and my standard assembly. And I'm going to start off by placing my base plate or my base feature. And let's go ahead and move into our wheel assembly. And you will see that we have four parts. We have our axle, our base plate, which is going to be our grounded feature, our brackets, and our wheel. So let's go ahead and choose our base plate and select open. And I'm going to go ahead and put it as an isometric here. I'm going to right click and place as my grounded option. So if you remember from other videos, this means that this part does not have any degrees of freedom because it's actually already come in here and it's placed and it's not going to move. So the next thing that we're going to go ahead and place is going to be our brackets. We're going to have one bracket on this side underneath and one bracket on this side underneath. So let's go back to our assembly. Let's go to place and let's select our bracket and select open. So I'm going to have two in here. So I'm going to select one on this side and one on the other side, and then right click and select OK. So notice that we have our degrees of freedom in our view here selected so that we can actually see the degrees of freedom. So these just move randomly any way I want. Also remember, if again visually you wanted to have a better view of how this is going to be placed, you can do a free rotate and we can kind of place it upside down. There we go. And that way you kind of have a little bit of visual, like it's going to be placed here. Same thing with this one if you want, but you don't have to. So we'll leave one free rotated and whatnot. So the next thing we want to do is constrain these pieces to the bottom feature here. Okay, so the bottom of this feature is going to be placed here. The bottom of this one's going to be placed here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our constrain. And we are going to go ahead and choose our mate. We're going to choose our base feature here. And again, notice my arrow going down. And if I select the other side of this feature, let's get all the way there. Notice my arrow is going up. So that's going to have those features going mated here. If I did flush, it's going to flip this one because the arrows would be in the same location. Okay. So if I go ahead and hit apply, right now you can see that yes, it is in this location. Here, let's hit cancel, but I can still move it because it's only flush to this piece. So if I look at it from the side, I can only move it side to side. I can't move it up and down anymore, but it's still not in that right location. I want to fully constrain this part. So I can go ahead and go to constrain and I can keep this on the mate and I can utilize my holes here. So if we select our hole here with our axes and select our hole here with our axes, again, notice one arrow is up, one arrow is down. So they're going to stay as a mate. And I can go ahead and hit apply. And now if I try to move this, it's just going to rotate around that one piece. Now you don't want to just rotate these because that's, even though visually it looks like, oh, hey, look, this is nice and aligned. It is not because I can still move it. And I could go ahead and do a second constraint. And again, mate with my axes here and my axes here. Now, one thing I do want to tell you is there is not one way to constrain these features. In this case, I used these axes to line everything. You can use planes from your parts if you wanted to. So just because you're putting this together in a mated feature one way doesn't mean it's the only way to approach it. Okay, you could do these in a different order also. You don't have to have the mate with the planes first. I like to do it because I like to get the location of my pieces stuck together, and then I can manipulate the degrees of freedom by doing additional constraints. So let's go ahead and constrain this second part. Choose our base feature here and our feature here. And again, when we take a look at it, notice now it went ahead and flipped. Look at our part here. are opposing arrows. And if I hit cancel again, it can move right to left. It cannot move up and down anymore. And it could also rotate. So we're going to, I'm just sliding that out of the way here. And we'll do another constraint. And we're going to use our circle here, our cylinder hole. And let's make sure we get the right one here. There we go. Now it's placing it in this location as well. If I hit apply, hit cancel again, I can only rotate it the one way now. And let's go ahead and do our constraint. And I'm going to go ahead and choose my axes here. So it's going to line these two axes together. Oh, excuse me. And now you can see if I have my degrees of freedom on, I can't move these at all anymore. So these are now locked into place based off of those constraints. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and grab our another feature here. We could do our axle next, or we could do our wheel. Let's go ahead and get our wheel in. Select open. And again, I'm just going to place it close to where it's actually going to go. And again, this just helps me visually. So now I can go ahead and I can do a constrain, and I can choose my axes again, and I can choose the axes of this feature here. And notice that in this case, the arrows are going the same way. I would not want them to be the same way. So I should show you these features too. So here, let's look at this from the side. So I have this option here. I have this option and I have this option. So that's aligning of how the arrows are going to be. So these are opposing. This is aligned. So see how all the other arrows are aligned. Now I'm going to hit cancel, because in doing this, I actually created just that axis there. So maybe that's not the best to start with visually. You can still mate these features. Let's check. I can still take this surface here and I can still mate it with this surface here. Now in doing that, I want to show you what's happening here. So see how it's mated on this side here, but now we have this giant gap on this side. You can actually also do an offset. So you could offset this, let's say 10. Well, 10 is too far. It brings it all the way over to the other side. So if we went back to our parts, we could actually determine what the gap would be between these two pieces. It looks to me like it's not even, there we go, 4 looks about right. So now it's offset, it's still mated. Go ahead and apply. It's still mated to this feature. I can't move it left or right, but now there's this offset to keep it right in the center. And now I can go ahead and do my constraint again. Let's rotate this a little bit. And I can choose this feature, and I can choose my feature here. And again, when I do that, these are all going to be nice and aligned. The opposing at this point doesn't make a difference, because it's still going to be aligned based off of that first plane that I made. So I'm going to hit cancel. And now the only thing I can do now is rotate it. Oh, it's hard to tell, but you can rotate this still. See, there's your degree of freedom. All right, so let's go ahead and select place. And let's get your axle in. Select open. And again, I like to place it close, right click and OK. So now we have to look at how is this going to be moved into this location. So if I look at this, it's going to be slightly in here. Zoom in. It's not going to be all the way through. So this is where you can get a little creative, and we can try a couple different items here. I could select constrain, and let's do an insert this time. So if I take this piece here and I select it, there's my arrow, and I want to insert. Notice I chose that outside circle here. Select, oops, too far. There we go. And I can select the outside circle here, and now that's going to be inserted. But if again, I can look at it from the front, notice that it's those two planes are still going to be inserted together. If I did opposing, it's gonna go through the other side based off of those two circles I created. But here again, it might be beneficial to have that offset. And it looks like that's actually too far. There we go. So now I have an equal offset on each side. Maybe it's 3.5. And again, I could go back and check my measurements of my part. So now that those two circles that I created are offset. And go ahead and put apply. And there is my shaft in there, excuse me, my axle in here. It looks like that one's a little bit further out. So again, I would go in and look at my measurements to have these equal. Although they look equal that way, maybe not. Oh, nope, I can see what I can do. Actually, let's edit this constraint. If you ever want to edit, you can right click and you can delete this constraint here. And now I can go in and put a new constraint. So one of the things I can do is I can really quickly do a mate here. And it looks to me like I have a little surface that needs to be mated here. So see how that's sticking out? So I can select my surface here and my surface here and see how now those are nice and flush. Again, I can look at it from the front view. And I may want to go back and look at my part and make sure it's the right size, because when I make that flush, looks to me like it's sticking out here. But remember, any edits we do to our individual parts will actually come in and make edits to our piece here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. But again, we still have too many, oops, hit cancel, too many degrees of freedom with this shaft here. So see how it's rotating, because it's only mated with that surface here. So this would be a good one. You would come in and you would also mate the cylinders. And again, it doesn't matter which ones you use in this case. And now they're stuck back together. So again, I chose to make the faces here flush. But again, I would check this side here because it looks to me like one is sticking out a lot further than the other. And I don't think it should. So we would want to check that. All right, so that's how you create this assembled piece. Make sure that you're practicing putting these together.